And good day once again, and welcome to the Wrestling with Faith podcast. We can be found on YouTube, currently at youtube.com/Dave Abbott UK. When YouTube finally let me change it to Wrestling with Faith UK, then I'll let you all know. But at the moment, it's Dave Abbott, ABBOTT UK. And you can also find us on Twitter at Faith_Wrestling and Facebook.com/Wrestling with Faith UK, all one word. We can also be found on Spotify, on Apple and Google Podcast and various other podcasts as well. But more importantly, the reason for today's podcast is we've got an awesome, really, really exciting guest. This is a guy who's done things in wrestling that I've never seen before in terms of the styles of wrestling and the wrestling competitions that he's been in. He's also a well-renowned author as well. And I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Mr. Rob Clooney. Rob, most important question from me today, brother. How are you?
Oh, I am feeling great. It's the holiday weekend as we're recording this, and right around here, the Motor City, Detroit, Michigan. It's a beautiful day. It should be a beautiful weekend. I'm feeling great, man. How are you feeling, Dave?
Yeah, awesome, man. Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, really, really well. The weather's just as awesome as well in Hull, East Yorkshire in the UK. So I'm currently baking, as you can see, in my conservatory. It's not the ideal place to do a podcast in summer, but we'll muddle on through, Rob. We'll get on through. So really, really appreciate your time and coming on today, my friend. And Rob, let's get straight into it, man. You are a very, very well accomplished wrestler. What I want to know is, first of all, and for the listeners, is how did you get into wrestling in the first place? So what was the thing or the things or the people around you that really inspired you to get into the wonderful world of wrestling?
That would be my mother. She was a wrestling fan, although my first memory of wrestling was actually kind of a turn off. My earliest memory would have been a promo with Hillbilly Jim. Right. And for some reason, that just didn't resonate with me as a kid. However, she was, a young parent. I was the oldest, and she always was into those monster movies that a lot of us in their 20s get into. Yep. We used to just record all of those Saturday night monster movies, and at the tail end of it all was NWA wrestling.
Wow.
I really appreciated the storytelling involved in NWA wrestling as opposed to the then WWF. It was really just great to get into it. Even then, I thought it was real because of the presentation of the in-ring action. Even then, though I was a casual fan, it wasn't until I discovered the WWF's tag team division, most notably the Rockers, that really turned me to a casual fan into an addict.
Fair play. I mean, what a great tag team to get into as well. I mean, the Rockers, for all the modern day sort of newer generation of wrestling fans, these were the guys who preceded the Hardy Boys in terms of when it came to high flying, high risk maneuvers, because there weren't, you'll verify this as well, Rob, at that time, WWF and other organizations as well weren't really known for the high flyers, were they? And the sort of risk takers. It was a lot more about the muscle, the big guys, like your Hillbilly James, obviously like your Hogans, your Andres, and and it was a lot more grappling, wasn't it? And more sort of mat wrestling back then. But the Rockers, man, they were a breath of fresh air, weren't they? Marty Jannetty and obviously the Heartbreak Kid, who we went on to be, Shawn Michaels, with a lot of high-risk maneuvers. So you saw the Rockers, and how did it kind of take off from there? So you're getting older, you're watching wrestling. How did you actually get into wrestling from being inspired by what you saw on TV?
Well, I lived in the town of River Rouge, Michigan, which is often considered, there's a debate if it's a suburb or part of greater Metro Detroit. It definitely has an inner city vibe. But that being said, it was a poorer city. So there weren't things like wrestling clubs or anything of that nature. So friends and I, we started doing our own little pro wrestling inspired shoot leagues. trying to wrestle for real. We knew punches and things weren't allowed, so we made modifications and such. I had just moved early in high school to Brown City, and I had a chance to join the wrestling team.
Wow.
Quick learner, state qualifier by junior year. Most of my other friends who were still in Rouge started getting more connected with pro wrestlers on the indie level. My late best friend even joined commentary teams while he was still in high school and such. And yeah, after graduation, I just hooked back up with those guys. Back then, it wasn't really as known about the wrestling schools, so I kind of did those little underground, untrained little circuits until it became more obvious about schools. And then I went that route.
So from there, then, obviously, you took a sort of a different turn from what some of your friends did. And when I said at the beginning of the podcast, this guy has done wrestling and won tons of accolades in all different kinds of wrestling. But talk to us about sand wrestling. I mean, obviously, I know it's based on the sand, but you're talking to a guy here, Rob, who does well to put one foot in front of the other when he's walking on the beach. So for you guys to actually get down there and get wrestling, how does that differentiate from being in an actual wrestling ring as the world knows it? What's the different rules, if there are any? And what techniques and strengths do you really need in sand wrestling compared to your standard, ring wrestling?
Well, sand wrestling is a first version of competitive wrestling, would be more closely associated with Olympic style wrestling. I was just going through a phase of my life where I was getting a little burnt out of the ring. And I discovered some mat wrestling tournaments here around Detroit every week, had an adult league, stuck with it, but I really wasn't happy when the season was over. Pro wrestlers, we don't have a season, so I wasn't ready for amateur wrestling to be over either. Started looking around, found a national championship over in Rochester, New York, which was pretty close. I mean, it's a few states away, but for a national championship, it was relatively close. And it was just this new style of beach wrestling or sand wrestling. From what I understand, like 2004, the International League introduced this as an international style. Obviously, it takes place in the sand. It's more focused on stand-up wrestling. If you take them down, you get a point. You push them out of bounds, you get a point. There's no ground wrestling. You return to your feet after points are scored. And if you happen to throw your opponent to his back, it's a pin. It's trying to recreate the old wrestling rules prior to wrestling mats. Wrestling mats weren't introduced until the first decade of the 1900s. And sand was pretty much one of the more common terrains to wrestle on. And you can even see pictures of the first modern Olympic Games in 1896. That's what they're wrestling in. It is in the sand. It's come a long way. Back when it first started, there were just 2 international weight classes. Currently today, there's 4 in each men and women groups, with a lot of high hopes that it'll return to the Olympic Games.
It's awesome because, I mean, I would imagine your mindset, your preparation, tell me if I'm wrong, because you're talking to a guy who loves wrestling but has yet to step into a wrestling ring. I am working on that with a guy who I did a podcast with a couple of months ago. He's going to quote unquote show me the bumps. I think that's a polite way of saying that he's going to use me as a toothpick. But in terms of, obviously, you've done the indies, you've done the local circuits, you've sort of flirted with the idea of obviously being around pro wrestlers on the indie circuit. Is your prep work for something like sand wrestling or beach wrestling a lot different to what it is on as we know it as fans, the indie circuit?
Well, with competitive wrestling in general, there's weight classes. That's one of the things I've always struggled with, bouncing between the two, is I'm usually shredding down to about 150 pounds for competitive wrestling, whereas I at least try to get up to more like 185, 190. I've never been heavier than 195 for pro wrestling. So that's one thing. With sand wrestling in particular, you definitely got to get out there in the sand. I mean, I've seen NCAA guys and Olympic hopefuls just go out there in the sand and think they were going to own everybody, and whoops, you just fell on your back. Even on the international level, there's been Olympic medalists that, just like I said, they just think they're going to own somebody, and yeah, they're not even placing. So it's definitely a different style. Every version of competitive wrestling definitely has its own uniqueness. And all of that definitely differs from professional wrestling, where it's more about putting on a show, putting on a story, trying to elicit the emotions from the fans. And both are definitely challenging in their own way, for sure.
So in terms of that then, given a choice, what's your preference? Is it the sand wrestling, or do you prefer to be in the ring, or is it literally you can't sort of really differentiate one from the other?
I really couldn't choose between the two. I love them both. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Because looking at this, and I've done my homework on you, Rob, as well. Obviously, 5-time All-American. In 2007, Beach Wrestling National Championships, you came 3rd place. You were talking about weights. That was obviously 150 pounds. 2008, Beach Wrestling National Championships, 2nd place. 2010, 2nd place. 2018, 3rd place. And again, you know, on and on, the accolades go. Is it literally a 1v1 then in beach wrestling, or are there any tag divisions in it now? I mean, how does it really work? Because obviously I know you've alluded to the fact that it's very akin to Olympic style wrestling, and forgive my ignorance, but the Olympic wrestling that I've watched on and off over the years always seems to be one-on-one. Are there any alternatives to that then in beach wrestling?
No, it's still one-on-one matches. I mean, unless you consider competing against the sun as a handicap, and it certainly can be. On a hot day, I mean, not only is it beaming down on you, but it's also reflecting up from the sand. So 2 minutes out on the beach is nearly equivalent to 6 to 8 minutes out on the mat on a really hot, cloudless day. Wow. And you got certain prohibits, you can't act like the heel out there and start chucking sand at the other guy's face or anything like that.
Would give you a slight advantage, but I appreciate that's not in the rules. And so obviously moving on from that, a little sort of turn in your career. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, you're an author as well. So how did that come about? And tell us about also after that what it is that you've written and you continue to write about.
Oh, well, writing is always something I've just kind of had a passion for, whether it was parody songs in high school and comic books to poetry, early adulthood. For a while there, I was living in Atlanta, and that is a very creative city as far as all versions of entertainment. I have been debating on some story ideas, but that's where I really started developing the craft back in 2009. The actual story I started working on first was not the first one I even published, but it was like a nice long learning process. Took a few years just to even be able to develop a writing style, and then picking apart, pro wrestling actually helped me with that, in the early blocks of storytelling. So I'm really grateful for pro wrestling to not only for the sport in and of itself, but it really lent a helpful hand in the writing. The first book I actually did have published was talking about sand wrestling, on just how to host tournaments. My little way of trying to encourage athletic clubs, MMA clubs, football, just clubs on hosting these things. And I'd like to think it helped. I wasn't the only person trying to push for this sport, obviously. We got a lot of talented people here in the U.S. and in various parts of the world. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on the consideration to be an Olympic sport. Written another memoir about a gas station, and that's really not worth the read, to be honest. But my proudest book that's currently available, my fictional debut, the very first one I started working on, is a story called Fast Cash, story about an up-and-coming MMA fighter who struggles trying to finance his training, finance everything, until he falls into the world of stripping, which leads to a whole host of problems in and of itself. I even mentioned some wrestling within the story as far as beach wrestling goes. But if there's any readers out there that would like to read something, Fast Cash is the one I would suggest. Anyone who's even part of the Kindle Unlimited program, it is available through the Kindle Unlimited. So yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's got pretty positive reviews.
Fantastic. And do you know what we're going to do as well is at the end of this, the very end of it, I'm going to give you the opportunity to re-plug that again and anything and everything else that you're involved with. But that does sound decent. I mean, to be fair, in terms of like wrestling fiction, you get the odd things in, like you've alluded to there, comic books and stuff like that. But I've personally not seen that many fictional books written about wrestlers or MMA fighters and things like that. Is it quite a common thing in the States that, or certainly in the industry of wrestling that you know of, that maybe we're not sort of privy to as much in the UK?
Yeah, I'm not really too sure if there's a lot of other writers. I'm sure there's got to be somebody out there. I know the biggest problem I had about this story, if I would have done my homework, I'm really not sure I would have changed anything because the story kind of told itself after I distinguished the characters. But like I said, there was also stripping elements. Something I didn't realize was the topic of MMA fiction is usually heavily used in the erotic genre. And this story is not an erotic story, despite being MMA and strippers. It's just more about a story of a guy trying to chase his dream of being an MMA fighter.
Fantastic. When we come off air after this, I'll have to chat to you about that as well, how I can sort of get my hands on a copy of this as well and have a good read of it. And I'll be sure to let you know, obviously, what I think when I've read it as well. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. So from there, then obviously you've done the writing side of it. Are you going to continue in terms of writing, or are you just sort of parking the bus on that one for now and focusing on wrestling and other things?
Well, I am focused on some other things. Currently re-enrolled in school, trying to finish up a marketing degree. Something I actually hope will help me promote myself as a wrestler and an author. Something I actually would be very interested in trying to help other wrestlers, even as far as trying to promote their brand. Give me a little time to learn and time to work. I am very sociable, or at least I'd like to think I am. As far as writing goes, I'm actually currently working on a memoir covering these 30 years of wrestling. And hey, I mean, I mentioned this had stripping in it. You write what you know about. I got my own personal stories in that endeavor as well.
Is that something you want to allude to, Rob, or is that not something you want to disclose?
Oh, we don't really have to get too far into it.
Yeah.
I guess as far as the stripping goes, it definitely helped. If I didn't do that, it would not have provided me the opportunity to make the U.S. wrestling team for the style of wrestling. It did provide the opportunity to train 20, 30 hours a week, have money to travel for tournaments. I've worked at probably close to 36 clubs in 7 states, a Providence, and our nation's capital. Half of which, though, really, it's like find a tournament somewhere in the country and find a club to pay for the trip. So yeah,
fair play. So it was more of a sort of helping you just finance and just to live a little and get out there, as well as obviously gain some confidence. I would imagine as well in an industry like that, you obviously gain a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
Was it more just to keep your head above water while you're actually doing the thing that you really enjoy doing and love doing, which is wrestling?
I think there's elements of me actually wanting to be a stripper at points too. And it all ties into wrestling, which is why I couldn't write a memoir separating it all. I go through streaks where I'm a little heavier on pro wrestling, then a little heavier on competitive wrestling, and a little heavier on the dancing. I can say I don't want to glorify it because I've definitely fell into some bad elements of that. I've also recognized that, took the time out, learned from it. And at the end of the day, I'm very introverted. As I am right now talking with you, I've been able to be more of an extroverted introvert. I've also really learned how to be able to scan the crowd, and something I still use in my wrestling matches today. Make that eye-to-eye connection and make those facial expressions. Really came out a whole lot better because of my dancing days.
Fantastic, excellent. So in a way then, sort of doing that, and as you've alluded to there, sort of making some mistakes along the way in that industry has really sort of sharpened you as an individual, almost. And would you say it's certainly helped crafted you as a wrestler in terms of the performance side of it, the performing arts side of wrestling?
Yes, absolutely. As far as an entertainer, it has definitely helped give me a more well-rounded approach, even when it comes to wrestling, or even my current little hobby is singing coffee-inspired parody songs.
Are we going down this sort of weird Al Yankovic type of route here, or is this something completely different?
I think some of them are funnier than others. And these are just skits. Some of the songs maybe 15 seconds long. I think maybe on the longer end, maybe a minute and a half.
Right.
I'm always told my funniest one is a Tim McGraw parody of Don't Break the Girl, but it's Don't Break the Seal, about drinking too much coffee.
Right, fair play. Do you want to give us a rendition, or have I put you on the spot there?
Oh, shoot. I just down 5 frosty lattes with 2 shots of espresso. I'm nearly halfway through my work day with the other half to go. All right, that's a preview. I guess anybody have to look it up on YouTube. It's definitely on there. I have my other versions of social media too, but
that's awesome. And listen, you're talking to a fellow musician as well here
right
as well.
on.
So I do appreciate how difficult it can be to perform. So really well done, my man. And I can't wait for people to get this as well. And again, we're going to put the links on there to get your parody songs, as well as your books, and as well as wrestling videos and things like that as well. Here's one question I like to ask everybody who's involved within the wrestling industry, certainly in terms of the performing side of things. Are you more comfortable being a heel or a face?
Oh, when I first started out, I was definitely more of a heel, and there's a lot to learn about being a heel than just generating boos. I personally believe that the heel's job is not necessarily to get the crowd to dislike them as much as it is to get behind the baby face during the comeback. I think that's the purpose of the match. Lately, outside of wrestling for Juggalo Championship Wrestling, which I've been a heel, but I'm basically doing the same character. I do either a USA All-American, or I wrestle as part of Twinkie Power along with Slim Trimmins. And I've been a baby face for easily the last 10 years. I've always had fantasies of going back to being a heel, but I'm well into my 40s now. It just wouldn't make much sense. Just enjoy being able to get the crowd into it. That could be a challenge, because even with a good heel that you get the people to just despise them, you still got to give them a good solid baby face to rally behind. I think with my learned emotions and stuff, I think I can really play it off well. Maybe don't have quite the flexibility I used to be quite as good at selling as I used to be, but I still put on a pretty decent show.
That's awesome. I just had my youngest son in the background there as well. My wife, God love her, is just taking him away. But he's really got into wrestling as well. And when he was literally just sat there listening to what you were saying, and one of the most important things, I think, certainly at that age, my youngest son's 10, and in terms of the entertainment value, he's at that stage now where he just loves watching videos of men and women just getting thrown through tables, especially the heels. He's really big on the TLC side of things. So obviously from that, you can't do TLC without doing the Edge and Christian, Dudley Boys, and obviously the Hardys as well. In terms of obviously being a heel, just touching on that, or even a face, what's the biggest type of bumps that you've ever taken, or continue to take, or have done a few times?
Oh Lord. Yeah, I too pretty much have a knack of taking some of the hardest bumps at times. I actually, for a while there, I used to enjoy taking a clothesline on the outside of the ring, whether it's concrete, grass, or even the steel ramp. I already mentioned JCW. We had just one of those things that presented itself where one of the wrestlers was throwing chairs at everybody. And when they threw one at my partner, it hit him, but ricocheted upward and also hit me. So it was like a 2-for-1. And you can't even plan that. It's just one of those moments. I kind of seen I could have got out of the way, but it's like, oh man, I hope it looks good for the camera. Just take it.
That's class. That's class. That is awesome. Have you got footage of that as well? Is there anything that we can see as fans online with things like that?
I do believe there's a fan video of it. That broadcast was called Blackout Brutality. At the same time, I don't believe they actually caught the chair catching me. But there is, if anybody is a member of ICP's subscription services, I do understand that the actual broadcast of that show does show this pretty clearly.
Wow, that's something that I need to get onto.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get the links definitely right at the very end of that, because, like you say, there are some things you can rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, and then on the day, something just happens where you just think, we've just caught lightning in a bottle there. Was that just one of those moments?
That was definitely, it's one of those that I was definitely proud of, and I can look back and smile, and yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So before we go into my quick fire questions about your love, knowledge, and appreciation of all things wrestling, what's the future hold now for Rob Clooney? What's the plans? What are the things that are in motion, if you can and want to tell us, and what do you want to be doing sort of in the next sort of year or two, since we've now all of us slowly but surely starting to come out of the pandemic, and we're getting our freedoms back. Yeah, what's the plans for you, Rob Clooney?
Well, like I said, I'm currently enrolled in school. I do want to finish up getting this marketing degree. I also am busy raising 50% of the time a 4-year-old who is already addicted to wrestling, both competitive and the pro wrestling style. She's such a drama queen. I mean, other than that, I am looking to still get back in the ring. Like I said, I team up with Mr. Fitness Slim Trimmins as Twinkie Power, a couple of out-of-shape fitness instructors who swear by the health properties of Twinkies. I also occasionally
I'd love that diet. I really would. I'd love that diet to work for me.
Yeah, I also occasionally team with still a young up-and-comer named Frankie right now as OK USA. Get a little more competitive in those matches. And yeah, you can find me around the Great Lakes circuit. I'm actually, if anybody from the Great Lakes region is listening, I'm certainly open to bookings or autograph signings, or book signings rather, if that'll help for a promotional type deal. I know some promotions may like sell tickets at comic book stores or bookstores or whatnot. But other than that, yeah, get involved in wrestling. I wouldn't mind doing a sand wrestling tournament this year, just see what pops up and continue with this memoir. Hopefully I can get this memoir done in about a year's time. If I had a clear plate, I'm sure I could finish this up in about 3 months. I'm already close to 130,000 words in.
Wow.
But yeah, and that's reflecting about, 30 years of competitive and pro wrestling, about 10 years of dancing, along with some few things here and there. I'd like to think it's an interesting read, but I mean, maybe I'm just being biased for my own work,
Yeah, but you've got to be happy and be, content and really proud of as well what you're writing. If you enjoy the content, if you didn't enjoy it, surely you'd go back to it, you'd scrub it out, and you'd put something in there that, yeah, do you know what? I am happy to put this on there, and I think people will get something out of reading it.
Yeah, there's part of me that wants to just hurry up and get this done, but I got to do it right. I only have a chance to say it once and make that first impression. Yeah. Yet at the same time, I like to think I'm pretty creative. So I've already got like a good 4 or 5 solid, at least short story ideas just lingering in my head. And if I'm not doing anything, I've actually have pretty good notes about these stories. But it's like, man, I got to finish this one before starting another one.
Yeah, you can't be spinning so many plates, Rob, because otherwise it just gets a bit messy, doesn't it? But yeah, really, really, really appreciate your time today, my friend. give us the links now, Rob. Where can people find you? Where can people support you? Where can people get in touch with you regarding the writing, the wrestling, and everything else in between? Where can people get hold of Rob Clooney?
Well, hopefully here in the not too distant future, I'll get a robclooney.com up and operated. I already have secured the domain name. But currently I am on Twitter, I am on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and just recently TikTok. I don't have all those sub addresses on me, but you should be able to find me as Rob Clooney. Each and every one of those platforms does have a Linktree link to all of the other platforms, so you only have to find me at one. By all means, any fans, any other wrestlers, anyone who's listening, feel free to shoot me a line. I mean, I'd like to think I'll get back to you as long as I'm not too overloaded. Always like introducing myself and meeting new people, for sure.
Awesome. And I know that, like, prior to this podcast as well, you and I have been talking back and forth now for a couple of months on Twitter. And I've really, really appreciated your time, because I know how busy you are and being a parent as well. So, yeah, it's really, really appreciated from my perspective. Rob Clooney, I'm now going to put you on the spot. So you've done a little bit of homework on these podcasts. I know you told me that off air. So first question is, congratulations. You've now become the captain of your own Survivor Series team against my team. Now, I'm not going to put my cards on the table just yet until you put yours on. You can choose 4 other wrestlers alongside yourself as the captain. So 4 other wrestlers to choose from any promotion, any organization, anybody you've worked with or anybody you've loved to work with, whether they're still with us or they've gone to be with the Lord, or whether it's male or female. Who do you put in your Survivor Series team?
Well, first I would pick a team that could gel together without the other components. And while the Rockers would be an easy pick for emotional reasons, I actually would go with the Hart Foundation. A nice mix of the power of the anvil and the technicality of the hitman. To have an intimidating force, I can't think of anybody better than Andre the Giant. I mean, good luck trying to get rid of him. At best, you're going to have to get a couple guys to jump on him. You know what I mean? And as my 4th option, I'm going to go all the way back to when pro wrestling was still a legitimate sport and go with Frank Gotch, often recognized as the 2nd world champion right after Hackenschmidt. And during his reign, he was undefeated, very innovative in his day, even though it may be a little more comparative to MMA than pro wrestling as we know today. I feel pretty good with having me, Brett, and Gotch being technical type of wrestlers, the power of the anvil, and just the intimidation of Andre.
Right. Okay, then. So I've got to counter this one. So in terms of the technicality, I'm going to pick 2 wrestlers to go with the 2 technical ones that you've gone with. So I'm going to go with Kurt Angle, who, as you well know, being a proud American, an actual legitimate gold medalist before he became.
Oh yeah, yeah. As far as a pro-am wrestler, he's definitely raised that bar.
100%. So I'm going to drop Kurt Angle on there. I'm also going to go technical in the terms of someone who's really kicking it now, although he's out injured. I'm going to go with Kenny Omega. I think on that as well. I like Kenny Omega for his high-flying style, very technical, and the guy's got some serious cardio engine there as well. So I'm going to go with that. In terms of power, to go against your Andre the Giant, I'm going to go with my favorite big man wrestler of all time, because I think this guy reinvented himself quite a lot in terms of his wrestling ability. Not a massive fan of him being on commentary now, but I'm going to go with Paul White, the Big Show.
Oh, right on.
I think at the peak of their powers, Andre and Big Show, I think that'd be an interesting matchup. And then lastly, you've got a little bit of high flying in there as well. So what I'm going to do is, to try and counter that, I'm going to go for the Lucha Brothers Rey Fénix as well, to drop that in there, because at the moment, I think visually, he's just, aside from Bryan Danielson, who was going to be my sort of other choice, I think Rey Fénix has just got everything in terms of high-flying entertainment. from a wrestler at the moment. Last one then. So you've just won the TNT Championship in AEW, which I think is one of the more exciting championships available in mainstream wrestling at the moment. And you're going to call out somebody from the back to challenge you. You've called out an open air challenge. And again, it can be anybody from any era of wrestling. Who is the one person you want to go toe to toe who you think's worthy of taking that belt off you, Rob Clooney?
You know, I would probably pick one of my assistant trainers at my first wrestling school. I was actually classmates with Chris Sabin, and he really did help Chris Sabin.
Wow.
But 20 plus years as a pro wrestler, we have never had the chance to wrestle each other. And that would be a guy named Amazing Nate Matson. He has had smaller roles on the big time TV. I'm pretty sure he's had tryouts, but he's never had that break. He's definitely one of the most respected guys here in the Michigan scene. Even without those stipulations, he's somebody I would really love to work with before I hang the boots up.
Really appreciate that. Rob, I'm very, very conscious of time on here. So I just want to say, because I know I appreciate you're a busy guy in yourself, and I really, really appreciate the quick fire answers. I mean, you didn't dilly-dally on those. You just really sort of give it to me straight. Normally people sit back and go, wow, you've caught me off guard there, but no, you were prepped for this.
I had a little time to debate the Survivor Series. The big thing for me was Andre or The Undertaker, and I went with Andre.
Fair play. Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Rob Clooney, we'll put all the links on YouTube as well to where you can find Rob. And it just leaves me to say from Wrestling with Faith, thank you very much for your time. God bless for watching and for listening. And like I say, facebook.com, Wrestling with Faith UK, or at Twitter, Faith_wrestling.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.